Hey, it's TDA and welcome back to Techtonica. I'm really loving this playthrough, and last time around I built a pretty decent mall. Now, there's a couple of reasons I want to extend this mall a little further in this episode, and, well, there's actually two reasons. So first of all, we have unlocked the Mark II belts, but we haven't actually automated those. And I do think you need to automate your belts because you're going to need a lot of them, and you don't want to hang around waiting for your belts to be created if you're going to expand your factory. The second reason I want to expand my mall a little bit is that I actually forgot to make any production for fast inserters, and they're really useful, so it's actually going to be fairly trivial to do so. Now, that's actually three reasons then. The third reason is that I want to make sure I have all of this up and running before I start exploring again, because we do have quite a few of these. Where are they in the journal? Right, we have quite a few things to do, most of them requiring more advanced resource than we currently have access to. So basically we're going to need to go out and explore a little bit further in order to actually expand our base. But in the meanwhile, while we do the exploring, it's helpful if we have unlimited production working in the background, because by the time we get back we have so many resources to basically spend on whatever we need that the production speed itself is almost going to be trivial. In order to get fast inserters up and running, you're going to need inserters, which you already have. We need kindlefine extract, which we already have, but we also need processor units. And processor units are actually really easy to make at this point, because all they need is electrical components and plant matter frames, both of which we already have. So all we need to do is put some inserters on the opposite side of the box where we are storing our plant matter frames, and make sure those are put on a belt. Bring that belt all the way up to where I now built an additional assembler to make these processor units, because they also use the, what are these called? The electrical components that are also being used by the sorter inserters. Now, initially in the last episode, I made this belt on this side, in case you're wondering, but just bringing the belt to the other side allows us to draw those electrical components into both the sorter inserter as well as the processor units. Now, the processor units are just being put in the box over here, as you can see. It's not a terribly fast creation speed, so you could also always double up on the assemblers if you really want to. But honestly, this is fast enough, because all we then need to do is put down another assembler in our pretty awesome row of mall production units, and just set this to build fast inserters. Now, we're going to need those processor units, we're going to need inserters, and we're going to need kindlefine, as I just said. Both of these types we should have plenty, and then just dump whatever processor units you're producing into this box as you are producing them, and see your fast inserters coming out. Now, honestly, you don't need hundreds upon hundreds of these, at least not instantly, so it's not a big deal if it takes a little while for your processor units to be created, because, like, for example, right now I can get these 40, well, assuming I have room in my inventory, I could get 42 in my inventory, put those 42 back in here, and that will already create 82 of those, or 84 actually, of those fast inserters, and that's just with a few minutes of work. So as you can tell, there's really no reason to make this fully automated, nor to make this very complicated. Oh, and while I was at it, I actually also added an assembler to make overhead lights, which also use the plant matter frames, but also just some wire and kindlefine. I actually completely forgot to build this. I actually don't like these lights too much, because they're extremely bright. I'll actually show you. They're super bright, it kind of hurts my eyes. But then again, they do light up pretty much the entire room if you just place down one of these. So it's up to you if you want to use them, but it doesn't hurt to at least have some in production. Now, in order to automate Conveyor Belts Mark II, we're going to need normal conveyor belts, we're going to need copper components, none of which is too complicated, but we also need shiver thorn coolant, which we currently are not producing just yet. In order to make those, we're going to need some more planters as well as threshers, so I figured, why not just make a nice little platform above where we already have a planter and thresher area, and just basically copy paste this build, sort of at least, on the next floor, and also add some verticality to our base. Now, I'm trying to use a balance between speed as well as showing you enough details so you can follow along if you want to, mostly because you've already seen quite a bit of these builds and not all of it is equally interesting. Anyway, we have another 6 planters, just like the floor below, where we're going to not put in the same plants, but we're going to put in the shiverthorn seeds, as you can tell, and those are going to go in a thresher. Now this should be able to keep up with these 6 planters, no problem, and then the output is going to go on this belt, and it's going to go into 2 threshers to refresh the outputs again. Of course, we have sorter inserters on the side to put in the seeds back on the belt so they can be reseeded, and of course everything else is going to go on this belt. Now, based from experience from the thing we built below for the biofuel, these threshers are actually going to have a hard time keeping up with the outputs. So you could actually add a third if you want to, but honestly I prefer just keeping the build a little bit smaller and functional rather than trying to really min-max, because the ratios are just too big of a pain to really get perfect. Speaking of optimizing your builds and the ratios being a little bit wonky, I actually decided to add in another biofuel assembler on my initial build. So this is one is in the corner, and it's actually getting the overflow plant matter from the belt and putting it into an assembler, combining it with some limestone from this belt and making it into biofuel. Now, because limestone is actually the bottleneck in this build, it's not necessarily adding much to production yet, but it is actually going to be very nice once we have Mark II belts, because we can upgrade this belt, make sure we have enough limestone, and then take full advantage of all this plant matter being produced. Speaking of biobricks, we can actually make biobricks in this new build as well, because we're getting plant matter from the threshers over there, and we're going to get some limestone from over here. So I actually added a secondary story to my limestone production facility over here. As you can see, it's not currently fueled yet, but as soon as we turn on the threshers, we'll get plant matter going. If we put that on the same outgoing belt as we have over here, we can actually connect this belt, this outgoing belt, up to this belt. Something like, well, we'll need an actual outgoing belt, but something along these lines. Whatever plant matter is not being used in the biobrick production itself can go on this belt or right into there, and we're probably going to be producing more plant matter than we can use in this single biobrick facility, but the whole point is just to make sure this is self-sufficient. Which, as you can see, it is, because I did actually connect up these belts only now to the correct ports, and of course with some sorters to make sure the correct stuff is going on the correct belt. I put in some plants just to get a burst of production going, and that plant matter should be turning on the mining machines really quick. That is assuming I actually put the splitters in the correct direction, but there you go, that should work now, and it is now up and running. Now, in order to make this coolant, we're actually going to need iron components, which means we need iron, and that is why I'm also going to add a second story to my mining machines over here. Now, I do have to admit that I made a mistake a few times to start drilling into the wall, get a result I did not like, and then pretty much had to reload quite a few hours back. No, not hours, but too much anyway. Back to the last autosave. So before you start drilling into a wall, make sure you save people, because yeah, it can get really nasty if you don't. Okay, so that is pretty straightforward. I'm only going to put 2 drills over here because we don't actually need that much iron. And well, as you can see, we have this very nice long belt over here going all the way into the smelter over here, and we do of course need to fuel the smelter, which is where this splitter comes in to basically siphon off a little bit of the plant matter. As you can see, we're making a ridiculous amount of plant matter over here, but that is not a problem because we need to fuel all these drills, and we're also just making some biofuel. Now, as you can see, we already have the plant matter on its way, so it should be a matter of no time before we get the iron rolling. Then the iron is going to go in here. We're going to get a little box in here just to make sure we have a buffer for all that iron. And then in here, we're going to make the iron components. Those iron components are then going to be put in this box over here, and I just use the long inserters just because it looks pretty. And then we have this one nicely aligned with the thresher. So this the choice for the long inserters here is purely an aesthetic one. And then in over here, we are going to be making shiverthorn coolant. I'm actually thinking this layout is probably not optimal. It does look very neat, but as you can see, we have tons and tons of these shiverthorn, what are these called, extracts coming out, and actually I think we get more than 2 assemblers worth of that stuff to begin with. So we're probably going to have to change, but if you want to keep it small and simple, this is a very nice way to do it. Well, the build is pretty much up and running. I just made a few small adjustments, like putting in a fast sorter for the iron ore and things like that. All in all, it's still backlogged quite a bit mainly because it was already running before we got it completely started, and also before I added in the second assembler. So I still have this setup with the long inserters now over here, because I like the alignment, and I simply put another inserter next to it. Now we do again have a bottleneck with limestone, because this middle belt is, as you can see, nowhere near fast enough, but that is something we can fix later. And we do now have a pretty decent amount of coolant coming in that we can either use to drill, because remember, this actually cools your drill and makes it a lot easier to, well, make large tunnels and things like that. But this is not why we're making this, because remember, the end goal is the conveyor belts. Now in order to make those, we're going to need a couple of things. We're going to need the copper components that you can see over here, but we're also going to need mechanical components, which basically means we need both iron as well as copper to get us going. Okay, now this took me a little bit longer than I'd like to admit, but honestly it's not that complicated. So what did I do? I built some more miners over there. We were getting our copper, same setup as before, with a very long belt, and I'm siphoning off the remainder of this iron belt that we were using for the iron components. Now, as you can see, the main problem over here is that I actually don't have enough fuel, because, well, this middle belt is supposed to be filled with fuel, but as you can see, it is not. Even though these miners over there are funded pretty well, yeah, I'm not getting in enough fuel. And the reason for that is actually that the threshers are kind of backlogged because all these extract is in here. So this is a temporary problem until we can get the limestone up and running. But until we do, this entire build is actually not completely self-sufficient. And the main reason is simply we're currently fueling, what is it? Something like 9 miners, as well as the smelters, of a single line of fuel that is actually not completely optimized. So there's a very simple solution for that, because down here we have more fuel than we're ever going to be able to use. So all we need to do is bring this belt up, connect it to the fuel line, and then we should be good to go. Something like this. And I do hope that they fix the diagonal belts, because this wonky this wonky belt looks, well, exactly that, wonky. You don't actually need the stairs. I just like providing some realistic support to my builds. Same over here. These vertical pillars don't actually have a function other than looking quite nice, I think. Okay, so this is actually working now. I didn't actually explain what I was doing here. So we are smelting copper on the left and we are smelting iron on the right. I think that much was obvious, but then we're actually putting the ingots on the belt over here in the middle, and then on these sides we have some assemblers making the mechanical parts, as well as some components. Now we actually don't need that many components, but we do need some, and honestly you could probably make your own life a little bit easier by putting all the mechanical parts on the same side, but I like my symmetric builds, and this is exactly that. I do like also putting in some buffer boxes here and there, like over here for example we already have 500 iron ingots in here, just because I am currently producing it and it's not actually going anywhere because nothing is connected to these assemblers yet. But I am producing it, so I might as well store it somewhere.
When I say conveyor, you say belts. Conveyor.
Belts?
Conveyor.
Belts!
Keep laying them down.
Okay. I think I'll just leave that in. It's actually really funny. Every now and then when you build a certain amount of buildings, she actually pops in and says like, oh, good job, you built a lot of assemblers, keep going. Most of them aren't as funny as this, but it's completely random and unexpected, and it does kind of break the monotony of building your factory every now and then. Anyway, I was building the belts in order to make sure the coolant can actually get out. I removed the box because it doesn't really serve a purpose. We'll probably build a buffer box later on if I haven't already done so. I haven't actually. But yeah, as you can see, we are now actually transporting the mechanical parts as well as the copper part components into a belt, making Conveyor Belts Mark II. We also of course need a Conveyor Belts Mark I, which is where the mechanical components come in. Actually, yeah, mechanical components, I keep forgetting the names. As you can see, it can't quite keep up, and that has everything to do with the fact that our coolant production is not completely up and running yet, again because the limestone isn't optimized yet, and in order to do that we need Mark II belts. But look, we have those now, and even though these builds are not completely optimized just yet, it actually doesn't matter because they are producing non-stop. They will never run out, they never slow down, and well, you're gonna take a while to use 300 Mark II belts, although that is definitely something you will use, but still, it's being produced in a matter of minutes, and if you do anything else, you're going to come back and find maybe thousands of belts in this box, even if you don't change anything. So again, don't worry about the ratios too much. Honestly, I might actually want to put in a belt over here as well, or an inserter over here as well, to kind of get the additional Mark 1 belts out. But then again, I don't really want to be using Mark 1 belts if I can help it. So, this means we're pretty much done. Not quite just yet. I actually want to do a few more things. For one, this. So what I'm actually doing over here is I have a little bit of overflow of copper components over here, which are going to be put into this box for no other purpose than just making sure that we have a stockpile of those in case we are not actually using them. I'm also going to use a stockpile of coolant over here. As you can see, I had a lot of that in production already when we built the initial setup, so there's a lot in this box. And we can actually use that along with the mechanical components to make these cooling systems. For whatever reason I can't click the assembler, but there you go, the cooling systems. This is an intermediate part that we can't actually use just yet, but I'm assuming we're going to need them sooner or later, so we might as well just build them because they actually need the exact same stuff that we have in this build. So it makes perfect sense to include them over here as well. Especially considering we're right here in the middle of our mall. Now we have a secondary level to our mall, and just to make sure that's easy to reach, I'm going to put in some stairs, some pillars to make sure this doesn't look like a giant floating castle, and then it looks something like this. So I added in a few stairs, one on this side, one on the other side. I added in some pillars to make sure it doesn't look like it's floating, like I said, and well, all in all, it actually looks really nice with all these lights coming on because it's powered. We now have pretty much infinite amounts of Mark II belts. I haven't actually put them in use yet, so let me do that as well. Now that is a lot better, especially if you compare it to the Mark I belts running right next to it. The Mark II belts are a lot faster, twice as fast to be exact. So this is going to be a lot more convenient in terms of making sure we keep up with the demand of limestone. Alright, so we now have infinite fast inserters, we have infinite Mark II belts, we have pretty much everything we can make in production in our mall right now, and it looks pretty decent. So, all in all, I think we're doing pretty good, and if you agree, please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so. You can even become a member if you want to support me even further, but of course only do so if you can manage that financially. Now, in the next episode, we're definitely going to have to do some more exploring for a change, and I'm also wondering if there isn't a better type of bus type system you can build, because honestly, even though this is very efficient, and I don't want to say anything negative about some of the giant factories that some of the other content creators have been making, because I mean, I like a giant factory as well, I just don't think it's particularly efficient in this specific game. Putting things in these boxes if you need some more buildings is a lot more efficient than trying to spend a few hours making a giant factory with a giant bus in order to optimize that. But I do think there might actually be a smarter way to make a bus in a game than even maybe this particular setup. We might have to explore that in a future episode, and if you want to join me for that one, again, don't forget to subscribe and click the bell and do every other YouTube thing that there is to do out there. Anyway, enough commercials from my side because I really don't like that stuff. But still, I think you're awesome if you're still here, and I hope to catch you in the next one.